All right, man, back in 1 minute.
How we doing?
All right, doing good. You're back in 45 seconds.
Okay.
All right, here you go in 10.
You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 844-927-6691. This is America's only interactive news broadcast. Please join us. We bring you the news. We bring you the facts. I comment on those facts, and then we debate the commentary. And that's how we do our business here. 844-927-6691 is how you become the person debating the commentary. 844-927-6691. This an exclusive from Fox News. James Rosen, the reporter, a senior Justice Department official, was demoted this week amid an ongoing investigation into his contacts with the opposition research firm responsible for the anti-Trump dossier, according to the Justice Department, confirming it to Fox News. Until Wednesday morning, Bruce G. Orr held two titles at the DOJ, Associate Deputy Attorney General, a post that placed him four doors down from the boss, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, and the Director of the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, a program described by the department as the centerpiece of the Attorney General's drug strategy. Orr will rightly retain that OCD ETF title. That's the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force title. That's good. He should. But he has been ousted from the fourth floor of Main Justice. He is no longer an Associate Deputy Attorney General. And that's also good. The reason is because, once again, there's another agency in the United States government that has been overwhelmed by the deep state, overwhelmed by former Obama-era government officials, providing obstinate obstruction to the Trump administration in moving forward. Initially, senior department officials would not provide the reason for Orr's demotion, but Fox News has learned that evidence collected by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, chaired by Representative Devin Nunes of California, indicates that Orr met during the 2016 campaign with Christopher Steele, the former British spy who authored the Trump dossier. Later, a Justice Department official told Fox News it's unusual for anyone to wear two hats as he has done recently. This person is going back to a single focus, director of our Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Unit. As you know, combating transnational criminal organizations and drug trafficking is a top priority for the Attorney General. Additionally, House investigators determined that Orr met shortly after the election with Glenn Simpson, the founder of Fusion GPS, the opposition research firm that hired Christopher Steele to compile the now discredited dossier with funds supplied by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democrat National Committee. There's an awful lot of politics flowing through that opposition research. Why was the DOJ involved? The DOJ wasn't the only part of the Obama administration that was involved in this dossier. FBI special agents were there as well. Why? By that point, according to published reports, the dossier had been in the hands of the FBI, which exists under the aegis of the DOJ, for some 5 months. And the surveillance on Carter Page, an advisor of the Trump campaign, had started more than 2 months prior to that. Former FBI Director James Comey, testifying before the House in March, described the dossier as a compendium of salacious and unverified allegations against then-candidate Donald Trump and his associates. The Nunes panel spent much of the year investigating whether the DOJ, under then Attorney General Loretta Lynch, used the dossier to justify a foreign surveillance warrant against Page. They used something. Because remember, this goes back to this unmasking. You don't have to unmask a former Trump, say, transition or campaign official if they didn't have a conversation with somebody that was being monitored by America's intelligence agencies. There were foreign officials that were being monitored by America's intelligence agencies. Those foreign officials were having conversations with all manner of government officials, some of them attached to the President Trump campaign and the President Trump transition. That there was some sort of FISA warrant that existed so that Obama-era officials could then eavesdrop on what was going on, not because they were actually monitoring, say, for example, any Trump campaign officials, but were actually monitoring the people they were talking to. You see, that creative bit of legerdemain has justified two things. Say, for example, Michael Flynn is talking to the Russians. We know he was talking to the Russians. It was his job to talk to the Russians. That's something that I said over a year ago on this broadcast. But now what he does is he says it's, and people are actually understand it because they've got a transcript of it, because he was talking to somebody who was under FBI and CIA and NSA surveillance. Kislyak. So anything he says can be used politically, right? Well, as a matter of fact, wrong. No. But were they used politically? Yes. Yes. Trap after trap set for Michael Flynn, and he fell into most of them. So remember, you have to trace back into the government where all this came from. So once again, now we're trying to find just exactly why is the DOJ involved in any of this? It's not their business. Why are they messing around in politics? Oh, well, because the DOJ was another one of the Obama-era agencies that had been seduced by politics. That strong elixir of Obamian politics. That was enough to disrupt not just one FBI director's career, but two, and threatens to do it to a third. Government officials of all stripes, at all levels, NSA, CIA, FBI, IRS, all across the spectrum, co-opted by Obama-era politics and practicing those politics and policies until they are either fired or until they are otherwise removed or demoted, in the case of this DOJ attorney. The panel, and we're talking about now the Judicial Committee, now we're trying to explain just exactly where this FISA warrant came from. The panel issued numerous subpoenas for documents and witnesses related to the dossier, but claims DOJ and FBI stonewalled an assertion. That was an assertion that House Speaker Paul Ryan seconded in a rare public statement in October. While the agencies say they've cooperated extensively with Nunes and his team, including providing several hundred pages of classified documents related to the dossier, it was only last weekend the DOJ and FBI agreed to make available to the committee for questioning Peter Strzok, the high-ranking FBI official who was disciplined in July for having sent anti-Trump texts to a colleague while playing a decisive role in last year's investigation into Ms. Clinton's private server. You know what's going to happen now? Not only is the investigation into that server going to have to be reopened, but Hillary Clinton is going to have to testify under oath about it. And once again, that comes back to a government that doesn't seem to have the willingness to actually clean up its own mess. But if they don't clean up their own mess, then we, the people of the United States, will realize that this is becoming an untrustworthy government. The best disinfectant is sunlight. What is Jeff Sessions waiting for? What is President Trump waiting for? We have everything that is necessary, certainly a far better case to move forward with a complete investigation into all of this from top to bottom. A complete investigation into deep state activities beginning with the inauguration of President Donald Trump. We have all of the probable cause necessary, far more than President Obama had when all of these doors and pathways were ruptured into an investigation of American politics by a very political president, a very political administration, agencies willing to play politics with that president to the detriment of the people of the United States and its trust in their government. Piece by piece, this is becoming more and more apparent. It is becoming more and more clear. And as we get closer to that clarity, the one thing that must indeed happen is that the investigation to chase these stories to reality, to then deal with the reality in a fair and precise and judicial manner, must occur for the rehabilitation of the trust in these agencies that the American people simply must have. Not just must have, but indeed deserve. We, the people, pay for this government. These people work for us, not the other way around. We are owed an explanation for this unbelievably atrocious political behavior. There is absolutely no excuse for any of this. But one by one, every week or so, somebody gets picked off in either the Mueller investigation or by somebody in the DOJ or by some agency's inspector general. One by one, they get picked off. My concern is that we're going to run out of Trump administration before we pick off enough of these people to be able to have the full story. We need the full story as quickly as we possibly can. The rehabilitation of the trust in this government must start immediately. But that is also going to require something else, and that's going to have to come from us, we the people of the United States. Many of us looked at what President Obama did and we concerned ourselves with, hey, is this legal? Those questions, hey, are we doing something illegal here, all drowned out in a chorus of, if you don't think it's legal, you're obviously a bigot. Seriously? But so now we have a sequence of systemic and systematic corruption leading to something called the deep state. leading to the sabotage, the obstruction, in some ways, destruction of a new administration moving forward with the mandate of the people. The seditious attacks on this president out in the open for everyone to see. And we find out that they have been led by our own law enforcement officials, officials from the Department of Justice, officials from the IRS, officials from the CIA, officials from the NSA, officials from the DHS. All in the name of politics? We now stand poised to have an entire country where the political elite have one country to live in and the rest of us have another one. Did you remember reading any of that in your U.S. government classes or your Constitution classes or your American history classes? Did you remember reading anything about what we've been seeing here? Did the actual smug assurance of arrogant superiority not do its magic work of settling you down, knowing your place? Because all it did was make me angry. You're listening to the Wells Report.
All right, sir.
Thank you. Actually, you didn't say anything, so why did I say thank you? I don't know.
Because you used to be saying, because I usually say,
Nice.
I usually say, sounding good, but I try to switch it up sometimes because I don't want to say that every single time. No, I'm just kidding. But no, man, I think that stuff pissed off a lot of people, man.
Yeah. Well, sure infuriated me.
Yeah. Along with all the other stuff about you didn't build that and all that stuff.
Yeah, that was seriously.
I know, man. Aren't you back in 1 minute?
1 minute.
All right, back in 10 seconds.
Okay. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Some of the other information behind what you just heard me talk about. Justice Department officials are reading through over 10,000 texts between FBI officials Peter Strzok and Lisa Page after it emerged that Strzok was removed from the special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia probe following the discovery of anti-Trump messages between those two. Department of Justice officials told Fox News they're in the process of going through the texts so they can hand them over to the House Intelligence Committee. Strzok, who was an FBI counterintelligence agent, had worked on the Mueller probe, but was reassigned to the FBI Human Resources Division after the discovery of anti-Trump text messages with Page, with whom he was having an affair. Page was briefly on Mueller's team, but since returned to the FBI. 10,000 texts. Allegations of anti-Trump bias inside the special counsel Robert Mueller's team is reviving as Republicans claim a double standard at the Justice Department, with GOP critics saying that Hillary Clinton enjoyed comparatively special treatment when she was investigated over her personal email use as Secretary of State. Hillary Clinton gets special justice. At the same time, we're sicking people on others who hate the president. They're sicking people who hate the president on him, and that's deeply unfair, said Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida. Gaetz and other House Republicans have asked FBI Director Christopher Wray for an investigation into the FBI's treatment of Clinton and then candidate Donald Trump during the 2016 campaign. Gaetz has specifically sought information on former FBI boss Andrew McCabe, saying in email last fall that the Clinton case was referred to as special. Yeah, it was special, all right. Had to get it out of the mainstream rank and file of the FBI investigative process. A hand-picked team of people looked over all of that material, and that's what they came up with. Nobody could believe it. But that's how the political process has infused itself into the FBI. The FBI is going to have Hillary Clinton come back in and retestify if anybody's got the guts to bring her in. I hope they do. It's either that. It's either that or have to deal with mistrust from the American people for the foreseeable future. Which is more important to this government? Which is more important to we, the people of the United States? Is it asking too much for the people of the United States to be able to trust its own secret police, the FBI? See, I don't think it is. If the FBI's intentions are to protect the nation from enemies, foreign and domestic, and it is, and they go about their business in a fair and restrained, benevolent manner, it's an agency that can and has in the past been trusted implicitly. But when the evil snake of politics crawls into the garden, all bets are off, as we have seen. At some point, you're going to have to start making some value judgments on just exactly how all of this came down. How did this deep state get discussed? Was it discussed by the Obama administration itself at the highest levels? Or was it something that just sort of grew spontaneously on its own? Considering the background of the people involved, it seems like there was a plan that they've executed brilliantly to the detriment of the United States of America. Do you agree? You are listening to the Wells Report. This is the USA Radio Network. Back with more in just a moment.
All right, sir.
Thank you, sir.
That is, what, 2 hours down?
2 hours down.
Wow, this thing just flying by, man.
Yes, sir.
All right, so I will be right back.
All right.
All right, sir. We got a minute 45.
Why, thank you, sir.
And now you got 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Here you go in 10.
Thank you.
Oh, sweat.
You are listening to the Wells Report, north to south, coast to coast. This is the only interactive news broadcast in the United States. Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you for finding us. We look forward to interacting with you very quickly and very easily, as a matter of fact. It's so simple. Call us 844-927-6691, toll free from anywhere. We give you the news, the truth, in fact. We give you the truth. We give you the facts. I comment on these in various ways, and you debate my commentary, or someone else's for that matter. The most important thing is that you leave with more than you showed up with, that you have more information, that you have a better perspective. That's what we're doing here on the Wells Report every single day. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell them to check us out. The President of the United States finally, after presidents before him and after much political dithering and concerning and hand-wringing, decided to move the United States capital to the capital of Israel, Jerusalem, instead of the, shall we say, political destination of Tel Aviv. There were a lot of people that all stood up and said, this is a bad idea. This is a wrong thing to do. It's a wrong-headed move. It flies in the face of decades of precedents and so on and so forth, and basically gave people an opportunity to yell about President Trump yet again. The only problem with all that is that for this one brief instance, it makes it difficult to tell the difference between a degenerate anti-Jewish bigot and somebody who just hates President Trump. For example, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. This is out of Reuters. Arabs and Muslims across the Middle East condemned the U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and they called it an incendiary move in a volatile region, and Palestinians in Washington said that Washington was abandoning its leading role as peace mediator. There is no peace. You know why there's no peace? Because Palestinians don't want peace. Because through terrorism and an endless war with Israel, they've been able to turn that into a cottage industry by being contributed to by many of the Arab states in the world. Arabs that are completely suffused, saturated in anti-Jewish bigotry and hatred. Anything that makes the Jews' life a little more miserable is perfectly fine with them. Here, let's send those Palestinians another $100 million. So essentially what Palestine does is they sell their misbehavior to other Muslim states for a profit, and a handsome one at that. The European Union and the United Nations also voiced alarm at U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to move the U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem and its repercussions for any chances of reviving Israeli-Palestinian peacemaking. There is no Palestinian-Israeli peacemaking. We can go all the way back 40 years to not see Palestinian and Israeli peacemaking. It has specifically to do with the fact that Palestine will not make peace with Israelis, period. They'd rather shoot unarmed, completely helter-skelter murder rockets into Israeli neighborhoods. This article from Mac Heinrich, once again, this is from Reuters now. Arabs and Muslims condemned the U.S. move. European Union and United Nations expressed alarm. Major U.S. allies came out against Trump's reversal of decades of U.S. and broad international policy on Jerusalem. The Czech Republic immediately followed the U.S. lead and moved their embassy into Jerusalem. Germany said that Jerusalem's status could only be resolved on the basis of a two-state solution. Well, it may be a two-state solution, but that's also going to depend on whether or not Palestine wants a state of their own. Once again, they're making a lot of money being a renegade terrorist state. They're making a lot of money doing this. There are a lot of people that put away a lot of money in Swiss bank accounts every single month, thanks to the fact that they sell their misbehavior against Israel to the highest bidder. Israel, by contrast, applauded Trump's move. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as we covered yesterday, said that it was an important step towards peace and that it was our goal from Israel's first day. He added that any peace accord with the Palestinians would have to include Jerusalem as Israel's capital. He urged other countries to follow Trump's example. I'm going to tell you something that you need to know. Anybody who expressed the barest shred of disagreement with moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem is a degenerate, pathological, anti-Jewish bigot. There is no other reason for them to feel this way. Unless I'm wrong. And if I am wrong, by all means, call me at 844-927-6691 and give me another example or give me another reason why anybody who would complain about the United States moving its embassy to Jerusalem is not based purely in anti-Jewish bigotry. Give me another reason. Boy, I'd love to hear that. Can you imagine? What would that answer be? You have any idea? Do you have any idea whatsoever what the answer to that simple question would be? If it's not anti-Jewish hatred and just plain irrational bigotry, what is the reason that people are so upset about the United States moving its embassy to Jerusalem? Anyone? 844-927-6691. Anybody? You got an answer? Give me some other reason other than just plain Jewish hatred. Hear that? Those are all the reasons. Nobody wants to touch that question, so what do? Well, what they'll do is they'll criticize the question. What a stupid question to ask. Why is it stupid? Well, because there are lots of reasons that have to do with statecraft and politics and so on and so forth. Yes, that are all rooted in anti-Jewish bigotry. That's all it is. The people of Israel have lived under the possibility that at some point, out of nowhere, a murder rocket could come flying out of the sky and blow their children to pieces. Well, they shouldn't have their children where they can be blown to pieces. Really? You mean at a bus stop? Where a guy crashes into the bus stop, hits a bunch of people, gets out, and then starts stabbing people that are moaning and groaning on the ground? Do you suppose he was upset that the United States made the decision to move the embassy to Jerusalem? Or was he just acting on impulse? Well, that's right. He was acting on impulse. Completely pathological, irrational, anti-Jewish hatred. That's it. Do you believe that most people will actually understand that anybody who protests the U.S. Embassy move to Jerusalem is actually an anti-Jewish bigot? You think people will actually figure that out? My hope is yes. That's why when you start talking about all of this and you start reading the journalism involved, especially from Reuters, you'll notice this. Arabs and Muslims across the Middle East condemned the U.S. move. Major U.S. allies came out against the U.S. move. But then you start talking about the political organizations. The European Union and the United Nations also voiced alarm. You know why? You know why they voiced alarm? Instead of came out against, because they realized that the United States, that Europe and the European Union and the United Nations cannot appear to be anti-Semitic or cannot be infused with anti-Jewish bigotry, even though they are. Never in the history of human events has a more accurate speech been given by any head of state in the General Assembly of the United Nations than when Benjamin Netanyahu stood before that body and said that there had been people that called for the destruction of his state by any means necessary. And the answer from this particular body was silence. And he just stared them down one at a time, complete and utter silence. Was it uncomfortable? You bet it was uncomfortable. But that itself was one of the most amazing gestures of someone staring down bigots as thick as thieves in the United Nations. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, in a pre-recorded speech, said Jerusalem was the eternal capital of the state of Palestine. Well, if that's the case, then maybe you should actually start working on the state of Palestine instead of working on the next batch of Katyusha rockets to be fired into an Israeli neighborhood. Trump's move was tantamount to the United States abdicating its role as a peace mediator. What peace has been mediated by the United States? And oh, by the way, if the Palestinians don't want to talk to the United States or be involved in any kind of talks, then what's the difference between where they are now and where they'd be in the future with the United States out of the picture? The answer is they'd be in exactly the same place. So considering what they've been doing must be a calculated bet by Mahmoud Abbas. And the only thing that's out there is baloney, BS, if you will. And so he can say anything he wants to because the end goal is the same. No progress, no peace, no civilization, thanks to the Palestinians.
All right, man. Sounding good.
Thank you. Hey, Phil. Phil, I'm printing the rundown. It's a little late.
All right, man. You got 30 seconds.
30 dang seconds. 30 dang seconds. Holy jinky winky ding. See new tweets.
All right, back in 10.
Back in 10 seconds. Why, thank you. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. The President of the United States saw fit to move the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And strangely enough, there are people that think it's the worst thing that ever happened in anyone's life ever. Palestinians said, my goodness gracious, it's like waving let's see how we say this, a flagrant aggression against the Palestinian people. What isn't? Is there anything that isn't a flagrant aggression against the Palestinian people? Certainly anything done by Israel or in Israel or around Israel. You know, this is one of those things that is a purely political process and thus is never ending. Politics loves a problem but hates a solution. The never-ending garbage between two parties of some kind of unwillingness to be able to match their future aspirations with their past mistrusts and come up with a solution that moves forward in any of this is a perfect monument to politics. For 38 years, Israel occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. That occupation ended in 2005. When Israel left, Hamas showed up. Hamas, by the way, an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land terrorism funding case. Hamas said that President Trump has provided the latest flagrant aggression against the Palestinian people. And then Hamas urged Arabs and Muslims to undermine U.S. interests around the world. Protests broke out in parts of Jordan's capital, Amman, as Palestinian refugees with youths chanting anti-American slogans. Wow. What's the difference between that and any other weekend? Let's see. Nothing. In Bekaa refugee camp on Amman's outskirts, hundreds roamed the streets denouncing Trump and urging Jordan to scrap the 1994 peace treaty with Israel. Down with America. America's the mother of terror, they chanted. Really? America is the mother of terror? Then angry Palestinians switched off Christmas lights at Jesus' traditional birthplace in the West Bank town of Bethlehem and in Ramallah, a tree adorned with lights outside Bethlehem's Church of the Nativity, where Christians believe Jesus was born, and another in Ramallah, next to the grave of Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, were plunged into darkness. All Palestinian factions called for a general strike and protest rallies on Thursday today. The Saudi royal court issued a statement saying the kingdom followed with deep sorrow Trump's decision and warned of dangerous consequences of moving the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. That is significant. The statement described the move as a big step back in efforts to advance the peace process. There is no peace process. It has been a 40-year exercise in futility. And eventually, people move on with their business. The United States has seriously been involved in all of this for 40 years, and enough's enough. The people of Palestine are going to outrage themselves right into irrelevance. People are just going to decide these people are insatiable. There's nothing that can be done. And they're going to say enough's enough. See ya. And this may be the first step. You see, as far as I'm concerned, this is indeed the first step, the first true concrete step in the United States forcing the peace process back into action. What should happen is that Israel should realize that the United States cares more about its fortunes than the Palestinian fortunes that they've been trying to curry favor with for 4 decades, with zero success. Palestinians have done nothing to do what is necessary to be able to find their own homeland. They refuse to recognize the state of Israel. And yet demand that Israel recognize them at every possible turn. This isn't the way it's going to work. As a matter of fact, we've proven it for the last 40 years. We've proven that it doesn't work for the last 40 years. I think what President Trump did was brilliant. I applaud him for it. You're listening to the Wells Report. This is the USA Radio Network.
All righty, sir. All right, sir. You're back in 1 minute. Back in 30 seconds. Hey, we're coming back, man. Here we go. Look.
You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number again is 844-927-6691. 844-927-6691. If you look at my pictures, it would be almost impossible for you to tell that at one point I was an AAU athlete, that I was a competitive swimmer, in fact. I was very, very competitive. I was in the conversation for the 1980 Olympics. And something happened that I think you probably are aware of. President Jimmy Carter saw fit to boycott the Summer Olympic Games in Moscow. That was not something that actually had anything to do with me because I wasn't on the Olympic team, but I had spent a decade of my life trying to learn how to swim very, very quickly. And I had spent enough time doing it that I realized just exactly how difficult it was to do all of those things. The 1980 Summer Olympics boycott was one of a number of actions initiated by the United States to protest the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The Soviet Union hosted the 1980 Olympics. And because of that, of course, other Olympic boycotts, so on and so on and so on. It was awful. It was terrible. And it was something that I think most of the people of the United States demanded that our government never do again, which is why I'm somewhat, shall we say, annoyed with the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley had a loose mouth moment. These happen. Please understand, I'm not criticizing Ms. Haley for making a stupid mistake. There are stupid mistakes made constantly. Most of them involve people speaking before they should and talking about things they shouldn't. I know this is going to be shocking to some people, but I've been guilty of that in myself in the past. Long time ago in the past, as not recently. I mean, not in the last, 45 minutes, something like that. But yesterday, Nikki Haley said that it remains, quote, an open question, unquote, whether American athletes will be able to attend the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea. Haley made the comment while speaking with Fox News anchor Martha McCallum, who asked whether it would be safe for U.S. athletes to go to South Korea while tensions remain high between the U.S. and the North. I think those are conversations we're going to have, but what have we always said? We don't fear anything. We live our lives. Certainly that's perfect opportunity for all of them to go and do something they've worked hard for. What we will do is this. We will make sure that we're taking every precaution possible to make sure they're safe and know that everything's going on around them. So I think that it's something that the administration is going to come together and find out the best way to make sure they're protected. McCallum then asked if it was a done deal the U.S. athletes will be able to attend the Olympics. Haley responded, that's an open question. No, it's not an open question. The United States athletes are going to compete at the Winter Olympic Games in South Korea. You know why? Because the Olympic team doesn't belong to the U.S. government. It belongs to we, the people of the United States. You know how I know? Because it's actually pretty good. If the government ran the U.S. Olympic team, we wouldn't win another medal for the next 50 years. Because any government agency screws up whatever it is that it's supposed to take care of. The 2018 Winter Olympics are scheduled between February 9th through the 25th in Pyeongchang, South Korea. I am not concerned about the North Koreans doing anything remarkably stupid to screw up the Olympic Games. That is antithetical to any kind of civilized behavior, and I'm sure that should anything odd happen from the North, that it would be handled, shall we say, suddenly, in a move that at once would cause an amazing amount of heat and then an almost insufferable cold. Does the U.S. Olympic team belong to the United States government? The answer is no, and it sure as hell doesn't belong to a bunch of bloviating politicians like Nikki Haley. I'm not trying to be harsh or anything like that, but on behalf of people, you just don't understand it. I think the best way of describing it was in a comedy monologue by Jerry Seinfeld. He called it coming in second at the Olympics. You work your entire life, say for example, you work your entire life to win the 100 meters at the United States at the Summer Olympics. You work your entire life. And you show up and you do all the things that are necessary. You go through all the hoops and whistles and all the steroids testing and all that kind of stuff, and you're finally there. One person carrying your flag on your back, the possible winner of the 100-meter dash, literally becoming the fastest human being on the planet. And you only get this chance once every 4 years. So if you miss it, suddenly you're 4 years older. Now that may work to your advantage, but most of the time it works to your disadvantage. Remember, it took you 20 years to learn how to run a 100-meter dash. It means that you started when you were 8. You did it all through your life. Now you're 24 or 28 years old. You've got a real chance. Power sprinter. And you're there. And you're in one of the middle lanes, which means that you might win. And you take your mark. And someone goes, ready, bang, and you run every step, a perfect tracing of your best possible race. And you run all the way to the very, very end, and you are edged out by 0.02 of a second by the guy to your left, who's just a little faster. And for the rest of your life, you say, gosh, you know, if I just an eyelash, I would have won. Just an eyelash, I just would have won. I laughed until I cried when I first heard it. I don't do it justice, but it was very, very funny in an incredibly tragic way. So Nikki Haley decides, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and boycott the Winter Olympic Games. And suddenly the person that's the world's greatest giant slalom skier in the world, he or she has been doing it for their entire lives. Suddenly it's 4 years later and they don't have a chance. They have that one narrow window taken away by politics. That is without doubt one of the most nauseating things that I can think about when it comes to politics intersecting with true life. The Soviet Union didn't care. They could care less whether the United States showed up or not because, you know, they basically they took part in the Olympic Games mainly as a propaganda effort to begin with. President Jimmy Carter announced that the United States would boycott the Olympic Games February 20th, 1980. It was horrifying for everyone. They had this make-believe kind of other set of games. The World University Games. I think Ted Turner was involved in all that. It happened in Atlanta. For all those people that had worked so hard. And it may be truly amazing that they have one of those very, very rare gold, bronze, and silver medals. It may be very, very rare that they have one of those, but it's not an Olympic medal. It's not one of those ones that resonates through the hollowed halls of history forever. And so all of this comes down to one American official saying that the 2018 Winter Olympics, it's not a done deal. Those athletes are going to be able to compete. Poppycock. The government of the United States doesn't care enough about the Olympic team to even lift a finger, aside from a little bit of ink on a very fancy stamp that says, okay, you can leave the country and come back in. Make no mistake, those visas are important. But it's not having anything to do with the Olympic effort or the Olympic movement in the United States. It's just a bureaucratic spasm of foolishness that's now attempting to overwhelm the incredible work of the collected guts and sweat and pain and suffering and success of hundreds of American athletes. Pursuing a discipline that at one point might lead to a moment where the national anthem of your country is played because you did something. They play that for you. They honor your effort, your work, and your gold medal for some Olympic pursuit. A life-changing moment following a lifetime of suffering to be as good as anybody possibly could have been on that day. For one moment in time, you were the very, very best at something on this planet. And you have a medal and a moment and images to memorialize that for the rest of time. Unless some politician wants to take it away from you to show people who's boss. My body ended up changing between my 18th birthday and my 19th birthday. They changed the rules of swimming to create a better opportunity for people to do better. Many of us old swimmers said, excuse me, you can't use those suits any longer because those suits are an unbelievably unfair advantage, and they were. And they were deemed illegal, but all the swimming records in the world were upset because of those suits. That's just kind of a little aside, just one little moment of bitterness I'd share with you. You're listening to the Wells Report. Our telephone number is 844-927-6691. 844-927-6691 is our telephone number. We'd love to hear from you. Please join us. This is the Wells Report. You're listening to the USA Radio Network.
Which suits were you talking about, man? The little bikini thing?
No, the full body suits.
Oh, okay.
See, back in the day, you were wearing Speedos, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you had to carry a little body fat, somewhere around 12.5% to 13%.
Yeah.
Because you had to have enough body fat to give your body a particular angle in the water. You remember seeing them swim in flumes in Colorado Springs? I actually got to swim in the flume.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I did really, really well. I had a pretty good stroke. They actually liked my stroke, but they said my body was too stiff and I had too much muscle mass.
Oh.
Too much muscle mass. I was too solid. I had sunk in the water.
Oh.
Well, I was trying to figure out why I got slow all of a sudden. And I had sunk in the water just a little bit, about a half an inch, and that's all it took.
Wow.
Because it's like running up a hill at 25 degrees and running up a hill at 30 degrees.
Okay.
Just that little bit of a difference changed it. Well, those suits allow you to float independent of your body fat.
Oh.
You see, body fat is buoyant.
Yeah.
Well, so if you can rebuild your body so it doesn't have any body fat, then your heart and lungs don't have to support body fat. But back in the olden days of swimming, it did. Okay, so you see, I mean, if you have less fat, you can run a lot farther, you weigh a lot less, your heart and lungs can work for your muscles instead of for your fat. But the thing about it is that when you lose your body fat, you sink in the water and you slow down.
And that suit made up.
The suit put people back at the perfect length. That's why all of them were different. They had different panels and so on and so forth because they tailored them so that they would get exactly the right angle in the water.
That's crazy.
Hey, it meant a second, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it was over a second in some of those records.
That's crazy that it did that.
Well, I was duking it out. I was duking it out for tenths of seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, I started swimming twice a day in order to get a half a second.
Wow.
I mean, it was stupid.
That's crazy. So how long does suits been outlawed for?
Since the Olympics before last.
Oh, okay. All right, back in 1 minute.
One flipping minute. All right, what else?
All right, here we go. 10 seconds.
You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. It's a sad end to an unbelievably tragic story. Michael Slager, the former South Carolina police officer who killed Walter Scott, was sentenced earlier today to 20 years in federal prison. U.S. District Court Judge David Norton made his decision after hearing emotional victim impact statements from Scott's family and other relatives. Norton earlier Thursday said that the appropriate underlying offense for Slager, who is white, was second-degree murder and suggested a sentence of 19 to 24 years in prison. Slager pled guilty in May to violating civil rights by acting under the color of law in Scott's 2015 killing. Slager's 2016 state murder trial ended in a mistrial. Federal prosecutors sought a life sentence for Slager, arguing he had committed second-degree murder and also should be punished for obstructing justice by providing the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division with false statements. It was a terrible, terrible story. I don't know whether you remember it or not. Walter Scott had just purchased a Mercedes-Benz. And he had a broken taillight. And there was something wrong with the paperwork having to do with the Mercedes. And it was one of those things where you drive around your brand new car and you really don't own it, but you really have bought it and so on and so forth. And Scott panicked when he was stopped by the police officer. He was sure that he was going to be arrested for stealing the Mercedes, and so he ran. He was a veteran of the United States Coast Guard. He ran. He was unarmed, and he ran away from the police officer, who shot him 5 times in the back and killed him. It was one of the most awful things I've ever seen. If you'd have met him, Judy Scott said of her son, you would have liked him. I didn't know anybody who didn't like him. Speaking for Slager, Judy Scott also said she forgave the former officer, a sentiment echoed by Walter Scott's brother. I miss my brother. Our family will never be the same. Until I got the help I needed, it helped me to release the pain of losing my brother. God gave forgiveness in my heart for Officer Slager. I'm not angry at you, Michael. I forgive you, and Michael, I pray for you now. I am not somebody who can find the grace of that kind of forgiveness. It's the hardest thing I deal with, fortunately, which means I have a pretty darn good life, that my philosophical inability to forgive people that have done egregious things to me is, I know it's a huge mistake. And I know it's a flaw in me. But I've always been amazingly impressed by people who could say things like, I forgive you, officer, for killing my brother. Okay. But a sad end. And Michael Slager will spend the next 20 years of his life in jail. The executive producer of The Wells Report is the Philip Brown. Our studio coordinator is Mike Hawkins. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for listening to this edition of The Wells Report. Make sure you join us again tomorrow right here on most of these stations of the USA Radio Network. We'll be looking for you. Until then, drive safe, be safe, stay warm if you can. And I'll see you tomorrow for another edition of The Wells Report.
All right, so good show.
Thank you. Sorry about the screw up at the beginning.
No sweat, man. But
it'll never, ever, ever happen again.
There you go, man. But, I could have called you too, man, because I was in there trying to get the audio in time and everything. And
yeah.
I just figured you would be there. But no, from now on, man, I'll call you if I don't hear from you, but I come in here like right The other show ends.
Yeah, this was all on me, man. This was
okay.
I appreciate your help and so on and so forth, but this one's on me. I won't do it again, I promise.
Yeah, no sweat, man. No sweat. No big. We'll just go. We'll just make up for it tomorrow, man.
All right.
All right, man. Have a good one.
God's blessings. Take care.
Talk to you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye.